The phone trembled in my hand as I dialed Alan's number for the third time. My heart raced, each ring echoing the pounding in my chest. Finally he answered. "What is it, Camille?" His voice was sharp, irritated. I took a shaky breath. "Alan, I can't do this anymore. I feel so alone, even when you're here. It's like I'm living with a stranger." "Christ, not this again," he groaned. "You're being dramatic. I work hard to provide for us, and this is the thanks I get?" Tears stung my eyes. "That's not fair. I'm not asking for much, just for you to be present, to care." "I do care," Alan snapped. "But I can't be at your beck and call every minute. You knew what you were signing up for when you married me." His words hit like a slap. Did I? Because the man I married actually wanted to spend time with me. He didn't treat me like an inconvenience. "Oh, for God's sake," Alan muttered. "Look, I'm in the middle of something important. We'll talk about this later." "We never talk about it later," I said, my voice breaking. "That's the whole problem." "Camille, you're being ridiculous. Pull yourself together and stop acting like a child. I'll be home when I'm home." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling hollow and numb. How had we gotten here? This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I said I do 5 years ago. A gentle knock on the door startled me. "Camille? Are you all right, dear?" It was Diane, Alan's mother. I quickly wiped my eyes. "I'm fine, Diane. Just a little tired." The door creaked open, and Diane's concerned face appeared. I couldn't help overhearing, "Did you have another fight with Alan?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Diane sighed and sat beside me on the bed. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. My son can be difficult sometimes." "That's putting it mildly," I said with a bitter laugh. Diane patted my hand. "I know it's not easy living here with me. It's not what you imagined for your marriage." "No, Diane, it's not your fault," I assured her. "You've been nothing but kind. It's Alan," she finished. "I love my son, but I'm not blind to his faults. He takes after his father in some unfortunate ways." I looked at her, surprised by her frankness. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing myself in this marriage." Diane's eyes hardened with resolve. "Then it's time we did something about it. You deserve better, Camille, and it's high time my son remembered the man he's supposed to be." "What do you mean?" I asked, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. "I mean," Diane said, squeezing my hand, "that it's time we gave Alan a wake-up call, together." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of something other than despair. "What did you have in mind?" Diane's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Well, my dear, let's just say that sometimes a mother knows best how to handle her wayward son. Are you ready to fight for your marriage?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling a surge of determination. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm ready." As Diane began to outline her plan, my phone buzzed with a text from Alan. "Working late, don't wait up." I showed it to Diane, who shook her head in disappointment. "Oh, Alan," she murmured, "you have no idea what's coming." Little did I know, as Diane and I plotted our next move, that this was just the beginning of a storm that would change all our lives forever. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed a stranger, tired eyes, worry lines etched around her mouth. How had I become this person? My mind drifted back to the day I first met Alan. God, he'd been charming then. We were both working on a big marketing campaign, our desks side by side. His quick wit and easy smile had drawn me in like a moth to flame. Earth to Camille, Alan's voice snapped me back to the present. He leaned against the doorframe, impatience written across his face. "Are you planning on spending all day in here? We're going to be late for dinner with Mom." I sighed, applying a last swipe of lipstick. "I'm ready. Let's go." The drive to Diane's was tense, silence hanging heavy between us. As we pulled into the driveway, Alan turned to me. "Try to act normal tonight, okay? Mom doesn't need to hear about our problems." My jaw clenched. "Our problems? You mean the fact that you barely acknowledge my existence?" Alan's eyes flashed with anger. "Not this again. Just behave, all right?" Before I could retort, Diane opened the front door, beaming at us. "There you are. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." As we stepped inside, the familiar scent of Diane's pot roast filled the air. It was comforting, a reminder of happier times when Alan and I first got married. We'd been so excited to start our life together, to find our own place and build our future. But then Alan had lost his job, and Diane had offered to let us stay with her just until things got back on track. That was 3 years ago. "So how are things?" Diane asked as we sat down to eat. Her eyes darted between Alan and me, sensing the tension. "Fine," Alan said curtly, shoveling food into his mouth. I plastered on a smile. "Everything's great, Diane. Thanks for having us over." Diane nodded, unconvinced. "You know, I was thinking, it must be hard for you two, still living here after all this time. Have you thought about looking for your own place?" Alan's fork clattered against his plate. "Mom, we've talked about this. It doesn't make financial sense right now." "But surely with both your salaries," Diane began. "Drop it, Mom," Alan snapped. "We're fine where we are." I stared at my plate, fighting back tears. This wasn't fine. None of this was fine. "Actually," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I've been thinking about that too, Diane. Maybe it is time we found our own place." Alan's head whipped towards me, his eyes blazing. "What are you talking about? We can't afford it." "We could if we budgeted," I countered, gaining courage. "I've been looking at some apartments." "Behind my back?" Alan's voice rose. "Jesus, Camille, do you ever stop nagging?" Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "Alan, don't speak to your wife that way." But Alan was on a roll now. "You want to know why we can't move out, Camille? Because you're terrible with money. Always buying useless crap we don't need. At least here, Mom keeps you in check." The room fell silent. I felt as if I'd been slapped. "That's enough," Diane said firmly. "Alan, apologize to your wife right now." Alan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air." He stormed out, leaving Diane and me staring after him in shock. "Oh, Camille," Diane said softly, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were this bad." I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They flowed freely as I confessed everything. The loneliness, the neglect, the growing chasm between Alan and me. As Diane held me, murmuring words of comfort, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan: "Don't wait up, staying at a friend's tonight." I showed it to Diane, who shook her head in disbelief. "This can't go on," she said, a determined glint in her eye. "It's time we did something about my son's behavior. Are you with me?" Through my tears, I nodded. Whatever Diane had planned, I was all in. Things had to change, and they had to change now. The morning after our disastrous dinner, I woke to find Alan's side of the bed untouched. My stomach churned as I remembered his text from the night before. Where had he really gone? I trudged downstairs, the smell of coffee guiding me to the kitchen. To my surprise, Diane was already there, bustling around in her floral apron. "Good morning, dear," she said, sliding a steaming mug towards me. "I thought you could use this." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, grateful for her thoughtfulness. "Thanks, Diane. You didn't have to do this." She waved off my gratitude. "Nonsense. We're family." Her eyes softened with concern. "How are you holding up?" I sighed, slumping into a chair. "Honestly, I don't know. I feel like I'm drowning, Diane. And Alan, he's not even trying to throw me a lifeline." Diane sat across from me, her weathered hands covering mine. "I want you to know something, Camille. No matter what happens with Alan, you'll always have a place here. You're like a daughter to me." Tears pricked my eyes. "That means more than you know." Just then, we heard the front door open. Alan stumbled in, looking disheveled and reeking of alcohol. "Where have you been?" I demanded, anger flaring. He squinted at me, then at Diane. "What's she doing here?" "I live here, remember?" Diane's voice was cold. "The question is, where were you all night?" Alan waved his hand dismissively. "Out. Needed to clear my head after that ambush last night." I stood up, fury coursing through me. "Ambush? Is that what you call us wanting a normal conversation about our future?" "Our future is fine," Alan shouted. "Why can't you just be happy with what we have?" "Because what we have isn't a marriage, Alan. It's barely even a roommate situation at this point." Diane stepped between us. "Both of you, calm down. This isn't helping anyone." Alan glared at his mother. "Stay out of this, Mom. It's none of your business." "It became my business when you moved into my house," Diane shot back, "and when you started treating your wife like she doesn't matter." Alan's face contorted with rage. "Oh, so you're taking her side now? Perfect. Just perfect." He stormed upstairs, leaving Diane and me in stunned silence. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, mortified by his behavior. Diane shook her head. "Don't you dare apologize for him. This isn't your fault, Camille." As we cleaned up the kitchen, trying to process what had just happened, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. He doesn't deserve you. You should leave him. I showed it to Diane, my hands shaking. Who could this be? Her brow furrowed. I don't know, but it's unsettling. Block the number for now. Throughout the day, Alan remained locked in our bedroom. Diane and I tiptoed around the house, speaking in hushed tones about what to do next. I think, Diane said carefully, it might be time to consider your options, Camille. This situation isn't healthy for anyone. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I know. I never thought it would come to this. As evening fell, Alan finally emerged. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot. Camille, he said, his voice hoarse. Can we talk? Alone? Diane squeezed my hand reassuringly before leaving us. Alan sat heavily on the couch. I've been thinking. Maybe you're right, about us needing our own place. Hope fluttered in my chest. Really? You mean it? He nodded. Yeah, I found an apartment. We can go see it tomorrow if you want. I was about to agree when my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Don't trust him. He's lying to you. My blood ran cold. I looked up at Alan, searching his face for any sign of deception. What was really going on here? Camille? Alan prompted. What do you say? I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Sure. Let's check it out. As Alan left the room, looking relieved, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. Who was sending these messages? And more importantly, were they right about Alan? The apartment Alan showed me was perfect, spacious, bright, and far from his mother's watchful eye. As we walked through the rooms, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the fresh start we needed. So what do you think? Alan asked, a rare smile on his face. I nodded, trying to match his enthusiasm. It's lovely. When can we move in? His smile faltered. Well, there's just one thing. The deposit's a bit steep. I was thinking, maybe we could borrow from Mom? And just like that, the bubble burst. Are you kidding me, Alan? The whole point was to be independent. He held up his hands defensively. It's just temporary. We'll pay her back. I shook my head, disappointment settling in my chest. No, if we do this, we do it on our own. The drive home was tense. As we pulled into Diane's driveway, I made a decision. Alan, I want to have a baby. He nearly choked. What? Where is this coming from? I'm not getting any younger, I said, my heart racing. And I thought maybe it would bring us closer. Alan's face hardened. Camille, we can barely afford an apartment. How the hell are we supposed to afford a kid? We'd make it work, I insisted. Lots of couples do. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, couples who actually want kids. I told you when we got married, I'm not interested in being a father. His words hit me like a physical blow. But I thought you might change your mind. Well, I haven't, he snapped. And frankly, I'm not sure you'd be cut out for motherhood anyway. You can barely take care of yourself. Tears stung my eyes as I got out of the car. That's not fair, Alan. I've been taking care of both of us for years while I what? He challenged, following me inside. While I work my ass off to provide for us? Provide what? I shouted back. We live with your mother. We have nothing of our own. Diane appeared in the hallway, concern etched on her face. What's going on? Alan threw up his hands. Camille's lost her mind. She wants a baby now. Is that so terrible? Diane asked softly. It is when she's not fit to be a mother, Alan spat. The room fell silent. I stared at my husband, a stranger wearing the face of the man I'd once loved. How can you say that to me? He didn't answer, just stormed off to our room, slamming the door behind him. Diane approached me cautiously. Camille, honey. But I couldn't bear her sympathy right now. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, ignoring her calls behind me. I drove aimlessly, tears blurring my vision. How had my life come to this? When had Alan become so cruel? My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. He'll never give you what you want, but I know someone who will. Curiosity overrode my better judgment. I replied, Who are you? The response came quickly. Someone who knows Alan better than you think. Meet me at Rosewood Park in an hour if you want the truth. My hands shook as I stared at the message. This was crazy. Meeting a stranger based on cryptic texts. But then I thought of Alan's cold eyes, his cutting words. What did I have to lose? I turned the car toward Rosewood Park, my mind racing. Who would be waiting for me there? And what truth could they possibly reveal that would make sense of the mess my life had become? As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a lone figure sitting on a bench near the pond. A woman, her face obscured by large sunglasses. My heart pounded as I got out of the car. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward her, ready to face whatever came next. I approached the woman on the bench, my heart pounding. As I got closer, she removed her sunglasses, revealing a face I'd never seen before but somehow felt familiar. "Camille," she said, her voice tinged with sympathy. "I'm Linda." The name hit me like a slap. Linda, the woman from the mysterious texts. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. "Who are you? How do you know Alan?" She took a deep breath. I was Alan's girlfriend." The world tilted on its axis. "Girlfriend? But he's married. To me." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Camille. I didn't know he was married when we met. By the time I found out, I was already in love with him." My mind reeled. Alan, my husband, had a girlfriend? "How long?" I managed to choke out. "Almost a year," she whispered. A year. While I'd been struggling to save our marriage, begging for scraps of attention, Alan had been building a life with someone else. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, anger rising to replace the shock. Linda looked away. "Because I'm pregnant, and Alan, he wants me to get rid of it." The words hung in the air between us. I thought of my conversation with Alan just hours ago, his cruel dismissal of my desire for a family. And now this? "I don't know what to do," Linda continued. "I thought you deserved to know the truth, and I hoped maybe you could help me decide what to do next." I laughed bitterly. "Help you? You've been sleeping with my husband for a year, and you want my help?" She flinched. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'm scared, Camille. Alan's not the man I thought he was." "Join the club," I muttered. We sat in silence for a moment, two women betrayed by the same man. Finally, I stood up. "I need to go. I can't process this right now." Linda nodded, handing me a piece of paper. "My number, in case you want to talk more." I took it without thinking and walked away, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. How could Alan do this to me, to us, and a baby, the very thing he'd told me we couldn't have? When I got back to Diane's house, I found her waiting up for me, worry etched on her face. "Camille, where have you been?" "I've been so worried." One look at her kind, concerned face, and I broke down. Through sobs, I told her everything, the texts, meeting Linda, Alan's betrayal. Diane held me close, her own tears falling. "Oh, my dear girl, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Alan could be so cruel." As my sobs subsided, a strange calm settled over me. I looked at Diane, seeing not just my mother-in-law, but a true friend. "What do I do now?" Diane's eyes hardened with resolve. "Now we fight back. Alan can't treat you this way and get away with it." "But how?" I asked, feeling lost. A slow smile spread across Diane's face. "I have an idea. It's a bit unconventional, but it might be just what we need to give Alan the wake-up call he deserves." As Diane outlined her plan, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. It was risky, potentially disastrous, but after everything I'd learned, I was ready to take that risk. "Okay," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's do it." Diane squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. Alan won't know what hit him." As we stayed up late into the night, plotting our next move, I realized something. In losing my husband, I'd gained something far more valuable, a true ally in Diane. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. Tomorrow, we'd set our plan in motion, and Alan? He was about to learn that hell hath no fury like two women scorned. My hands trembled as I dialed Alan's number, Diane's plan echoing in my mind. One phone call to set everything in motion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "What is it, Camille?" Alan's irritated voice crackled through the speaker. I swallowed hard, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Alan, I need your help. It's your mother." "Mom? What about her?" "She's been different lately. Cruel. I think she wants me out of the house." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Camille, don't start this again. Mom's been nothing but kind to you." I pressed on, my heart racing. "No, Alan, you don't understand. Yesterday, she threatened me, said if I didn't leave, she'd make my life hell." "That doesn't sound like Mom at all," Alan said, his tone dismissive. "You're probably just misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I injected real anger into my voice now. "Your mother told me I was worthless, that you'd be better off without me. How am I supposed to misunderstand that?" Alan's voice hardened. "Look, I'm sure if we all sit down and talk." "Talk?" I nearly shouted. "Alan, I'm scared to be in this house. Don't you care at all?" There was a long silence, then quietly, "Of course I care, Camille, but what do you want me to do? It's her house. My blood ran cold. Even faced with the idea of his mother threatening his wife, Alan couldn't muster any real concern. Diane had been right. He truly didn't care anymore. I want you to stand up for me, I said, my voice breaking. To choose me, for once. Alan sighed again. Camille, Suddenly I heard a muffled female voice in the background. Babe, who are you talking to? My heart stopped. That wasn't Diane's voice. No one, Alan said quickly, his voice distant as if he'd moved the phone away. Just work stuff. I'll be there in a minute. Ice flooded my veins. Linda. He was Linda. Alan, I said, my voice deadly calm now. Who's there with you? What? No one. Look, Camille, I've got to go. We'll talk about this mom thing later, okay? The line went dead. I stared at the phone, shock and rage warring inside me. Diane appeared in the doorway, her face etched with concern. Camille, what happened? I told her everything, Alan's callous response to our fabricated story and the damning evidence of the female voice. Diane's face hardened. That's it, no more games. It's time we confronted him directly. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. You're right, but first there's something I need to do. I pulled out the piece of paper Linda had given me and dialed the number. Hello? Linda's hesitant voice answered. Linda, it's Camille. We need to talk. In person. Now. There was a pause, then a shaky exhale. Okay, where? I gave her the address of a nearby cafe. And Linda, bring any proof you have of your relationship with Alan. Texts, photos, anything. Okay, but why? Because, I said, my voice steel, we're going to take that bastard down. As I hung up, I caught Diane's approving nod. That's my girl, she said softly. I grabbed my keys, a newfound determination coursing through me. I'll be back soon, and then we're going to confront Alan once and for all. As I drove to meet Linda, my mind raced with possibilities. This was it, the moment everything would change. Alan's web of lies was about to come crashing down around him. And I was done being the victim. It was time to fight back. My hands shook as I spread the damning evidence across Diane's kitchen table. Photos, text messages, even hotel receipts. Linda had provided it all. Each piece was a knife to my heart, but also fuel for the fire burning inside me. Diane's face was a mask of controlled fury as she examined the proof of her son's betrayal. That miserable lying snake, she muttered. I nodded, my throat tight. We have to confront him, tonight. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan. On my way home, we need to talk about Mom. Diane and I exchanged glances. This was it. Are you ready? She asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. We heard Alan's key in the lock, and my heart raced. He walked in, his face clouding when he saw us both waiting. What's going on? He asked warily. I stood, my voice steadier than I felt. We know everything, Alan. About Linda, about the baby. The color drained from his face. Camille, I can explain. Explain? Diane's voice cracked like a whip. Explain how you've been lying to your wife to me for over a year? Alan's eyes darted between us. Mom, this doesn't concern you. The hell it doesn't, Diane shouted. You brought that woman into my house, Alan. You made a fool of all of us. I stepped forward, laying out the evidence on the coffee table. No more lies, Alan. It's over. He stared at the photos, the messages, his face a mix of shock and anger. You went through my things? You talked to Linda? Don't you dare try to turn this around on us, I spat. You're the one who betrayed your vows, who's been living a double life. Alan's face hardened. Fine. You want the truth? I'm in love with Linda. I have been for months. She understands me in a way you never could, Camille. His words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. And the baby? Were you just going to abandon your child? He flinched. That was complicated. I told Linda we couldn't keep it. It would ruin everything. Diane made a sound of disgust. I didn't raise you to be this kind of man, Alan, to throw away your family, your responsibilities. You didn't raise me at all, Alan shouted. You were too busy trying to control every aspect of my life. So that's why we're still living in this damn house. I watched mother and son face off, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. But I wasn't about to let Alan deflect from his actions. Enough, I yelled. This isn't about your childhood issues, Alan. This is about the fact that you've been lying to me, cheating on me for months, and now you have a child on the way that you're trying to abandon. Alan's face twisted with rage. What do you want from me, Camille? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ever married you. I'm sorry I wasted years of my life trying to make this work when we both know it's been over for a long time." His words hung in the air, sharp and final. I felt something inside me break, but also something else, a sense of release. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "It is over. I want a divorce." Alan blinked, clearly not expecting this. "What?" I turned to Diane, who nodded in support. "I'm leaving, Alan. Tonight, and I'm taking half of everything we own." "You can't do that," he sputtered. "Watch me," I said, my voice steel. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." As I walked out of the room to pack my bags, I heard Diane's voice, cold and final. "And you, my son, will be leaving too. This house is no longer your home." I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding. This was it, the end of my marriage, but also the beginning of something new. Whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't face it alone. I had Diane, and more importantly, I had myself. It was time to reclaim my life on my own terms. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Diane's guest room, where I'd spent the night after the explosive confrontation with Alan. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the divorce papers in my hands. This was it, the final step in reclaiming my life. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Diane entered, her face etched with concern and determination. "Are you ready, dear?" I nodded, standing up. "As I'll ever be." We made our way downstairs, where Alan waited, his face a mask of anger and defeat. The tension in the room was palpable as we all sat around the kitchen table. "Before we do this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I want to know why, Alan. Why wasn't I enough?" Alan's jaw clenched. "It wasn't about you, Camille. I felt trapped in this house, in this life. Linda was an escape." "An escape?" Diane's voice cracked like a whip. "You destroyed your marriage for an escape?" Alan's eyes flashed. "You're one to talk, Mom. You've been suffocating me for years, always hovering, always judging." I watched as mother and son glared at each other, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. But I wasn't about to let Alan deflect from his actions. "Enough," I said firmly. "This isn't about your mother, Alan. This is about the choices you made, the lies you told, the family you're abandoning." Alan's face crumpled. "I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt anyone." "But you did," I said softly. "You hurt all of us, and now we all have to live with the consequences." I slid the divorce papers across the table. Alan stared at them for a long moment before picking up the pen. As he signed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Really, truly over. "What happens now?" Alan asked, his voice small. Diane spoke up, her tone resolute. "Now you leave. This house is no longer your home. I'm signing it over to Camille." Alan's head snapped up. "What, Mom, you can't." "I can, and I am," Diane cut him off. "Camille needs a fresh start, and so do I. We're going to sell this place and split the proceeds. Then we're both moving on, together." I looked at Diane in shock. We hadn't discussed this. "Diane, I can't accept." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You can, and you will. You're the daughter I always wanted, Camille. Let me do this for you, for us." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, overwhelmed by her generosity and love. Alan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "So that's it? You're both just cutting me out of your lives?" I met his gaze steadily. "You cut yourself out, Alan. But it doesn't have to be forever. If you get help, if you make amends, especially to Linda and your child, maybe someday we can have a relationship again. But for now, yes, this is goodbye." As Alan walked out the door, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But instead of sadness, I felt hope blooming in my chest. Diane and I spent the rest of the day making plans. We'd sell the house, find new places to live, close to each other, but not too close. We talked about trips we wanted to take, hobbies we wanted to pursue. For the first time in years, I felt excited about the future. That night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Diane turned to me with a smile. "You know, Camille, I always wanted a daughter. I just never expected to find her quite like this." I leaned my head on her shoulder, feeling truly at peace. I always wanted a mother who understood me. Looks like we both got our wish. As the sky turned from gold to purple, I realized that sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about love. And Diane and I, we'd chosen each other. We'd weathered the storm together and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't alone anymore, and that was worth everything.